Reflections on the conceptual exercise, right? This is number three. Um, this is going to be relatively short. I think I alluded to this earlier. Key concepts are at the core of this course, and constructing durable definitions and examples of are really part of the foundational exercises. We'll look at module form planning, but there are a number of ways to get students and frankly yourselves to get involved in this act of constructing, defining, making sense of what the terms are. Visible thinking routines at a Project Zero at Harvard Graduate School of Education are really great tools to either help you define these terms or make connections to, as we're looking at examples from moral politics. Just for example, in terms of not really lesson ideas, but exercises. I'll regularly, but not always, start class with a news story from NPR from that day or the day before. Occasionally the BBC, depending on just the topic and the accessibility. But really anything, the act of listen. I use radio for a number of reasons. One of them is to get students to actively listen, to put things down and just to listen and then discuss. And sometimes some days we'll just run the whole class based on the what comes out of a 5-minute radio broadcast. I think it's different than seeing something on video. Not that I don't use video as well, but it's just different. I like the act of listening and teaching that. As anyway, that doesn't matter so much. But what works very, very well are visible thinking routines that ask students to first of all summarize what's going on here in a particular story. You can do the same thing for maps or for images or really anything else. And then secondly, what makes you say that? And we frame our discussions around the what makes you say that part that has to include concepts that we're working with. And by the end of the course, we're working with 16 concepts. So anytime a student were to sorry, my phone is beeping. Anytime a student were to respond to or make a comment in class, so say we're listening to an NPR story on Brexit, for example, the student's response must include a conceptual definition. So the rule is, all right, we're going to talk about inequality. Well, how do we understand inequality through the Brexit debate? What are the discussion points on both sides of the debate within England? How do we understand, how does the debate about Brexit in the European Union at large or in America or anywhere else, frankly, connect to this idea of, say, inequality? So those are ways in which, very, very simple ways, but ways you can connect the concept to your larger discussion and to your lessons. And so this exercise asks you to go through and obviously define definitions and find examples, which everyone we see it straightforward. Your commentary your comments are great as well. I think the one thing that you don't want to overlook is that, frankly, we created definitions in the Global Politics Guide, and so those are also good launching points. In TOK, when I've taught that, we've walked through all of the AOKs and WOKs, and students are not allowed to look at the syllabus in the first place, and so they build their own definitions of, say, memory, for example. And then, in teams, excuse me, and then eventually we get to the point where we're discussing those concepts, and then it's introducing the piece from the syllabus, and then the discussion elevates and say, well, how is your definition? What ways is it similar? What ways is it distinct? How is it better than what's published in the guide? But don't forget that as a resource, because what you want to be able to do is to constantly work with students to help build their conceptual definition over time. Things that I found both in my own practice as well as with other teachers is that spiral or perpetual work with concepts, and particularly the four key ones: power, sovereignty, legitimacy, interdependence. And those are the four concepts that run through everything. Not that human rights or development or peace and conflict don't, particularly if you take a case study approach to teaching the course. But I try to, or not try to, I build those concepts in and spiral them constantly. So even as we're getting those last lessons in March of year 2 for HL, we're still having debates and discussion about what power means, and what power means in this particular context, and how we've gone from understanding power, as the ability to to get others to do what they would otherwise not. We think about hard power and soft power, largely in conventional terms when we introduce students to world politics. But by the end, we're talking about power in structural detail, and looking at how power constructs social relationships and frames social relationships, particularly through the lenses of gender and economic inequality in the cases we look at right towards the end. So you always want to have that conceptual discussion and relate the concepts as often as possible in really everything that you do. So looking at everyone's exercises, again, a broad range of interests from all of you, which I think is fantastic. You were able to, if you were to go back and read through all of these or download these and look at them again as you're prepping to teach the course in a few months, there are so many different ideas and ways in which you can conceptualize these key terms. Good ways to, good examples for students is one say, look, this is the workshop I did over the summer. Look at the different ways that my colleagues around the world worked on this. How can you do this? How can you do this better? Things like that. So, and again, a great exercise here and great responses from all of you with respect to this. So, okay, thanks.